You've reached Joyce Barnett's channel, and today I'm going to talk about how you can find good tenants for your rental property. My experience on finding good tenants, I put my rentals on Zillow, and that seems to pull a lot of tenants. In the past, when I've done that, I seem to get a ton of people applying. The rental market fluctuates. Right now, rents have been kind of soft depending on what area you are in, and then also how many rentals are on the market. You have to take all that into account. How many rentals are on the market, what prices are out there. And if you put a rental up for rent and you see that you're not getting good people applying, I lower the rent amount because I have found in the past that if your property is vacant for 1 or 2 months, how much rent could you have gotten for those 2 months? You need to take into account, by trying to get a higher amount of rent, the problem is you're sitting on the market and the property's vacant. It's costing you money because you have to pay the utility bills and the insurance. And if you have a payment, it's costing you a lot of money. So wouldn't you rather just get a tenant faster? So I lower the rent. I find out what other people are charging, and then I go a little below market. And that's how I get a tenant really fast for my rental property. Meet with them. I get a good feeling of what kind of tenant they're going to be. If the tenant is handy, that's always helps too, because if there's small stuff that breaks, sometimes they can fix it. You could even take a little bit of money off the rent. They always appreciate that. If they fix something themselves, give them a little bonus of little money off their rent. So of course, they have to have a certain FICO score. I've rented to tenants that had bad credit before. Depends on how bad their credit is, but depending on what's on their credit report, I had a tenant, a man and his fiance, and she had horrible credit. She didn't even pay her utility bills. And I got talked into renting my property to them because they were being represented by a real estate agent. I ended up getting, I don't know if you can do that now, but I got double the deposit. I don't think you can do that now. And then at the end of 12 months, he wanted the second deposit back. He stopped paying his rent. It started slowly. They started not paying their rent on time, and then it got later and later and later. Then it got to the point where he wasn't going to pay until the end of the month. So, I ended up having to evict him, and I really feel that I should have not rented to them because of the fact that she didn't even pay her utility bills. And if somebody doesn't even pay their utility bills, that's going to tell you something about their character. I would not suggest renting to anybody if it shows they're delinquent on utility bills. That's a big red flag. Next subject, should you raise the rent on a tenant every year? My experience is sometimes I do raise rents. I usually don't raise them that high. If I get a really good tenant, I've had tenants in the past where I didn't raise their rent hardly anything. Every 2 or 3 years, I bump it up a little bit. But if you have a really good tenant that's paying their rent on time, raising their rent can make them start searching for another rental property to move to. People can only afford so much. And if there are other properties that are cheaper than your property, then they will find something cheaper, and the possibility of them moving out because of you raising the rent are pretty high if they find another rental property cheaper. My motto is try to keep your rent a little below market rent. And that way, as rent goes up, or if it does go up, because I've seen a little bit of a pullback on rent the past year, but you'll still be below market. Therefore, if they search for other rentals, they won't be able to find anything as cheap as what they're renting for, and therefore they stay in the property longer. Once a tenant moves out, this is going to cost you some money. Normally, for one thing, the vacancy alone is going to cost you at least 1 month's rent. So you got to put that into the equation. And then also you're going to have to do stuff, usually depending on how long they've lived there, but you'd be surprised of how much work you have to do after a tenant moves out, like touch-up painting, cleaning the carpet, sometimes replacing carpeting. Um, there's houses have a tendency to get run down is, the longer you have it rented, that tenant is using everything in the property. All the shower, they're using that shower every day. They're using all of the appliances every day. And then, the flooring. So all of that's getting used. And when they move out, sometimes you can find yourself having to replace stuff. So that's going to cost you money. Usually the painting, and to have interior paint done on a property, the price of it's gone way up. I just paid $4,000 to have a condo painted on the inside. They did the walls, the ceiling, and that was 4 grand just from switching tenants. Property hadn't been painted in a long time. I had a tenant in there for 9 years, but it cost me, after that tenant moved out, I had to repaint the inside, and then I ended up putting some flooring in, and it cost me about $10,000 to fix up the property to get a new tenant. So you have to think about that. If you have a good tenant, try to keep their rent below market. That's my suggestion. And that way they're not going to search for somewhere else to go. If they have to pay more rent somewhere else, they're not going to want to move out. How much do property managers charge? My experience is property managers normally charge about 10% of the rent amount. So if you're charging $2,000, they're going to charge $200 per month. And then to find you a tenant, normally they charge half a month's rent. So if you're renting the property, let's say for $5,000 a month, they're going to charge $2,500 to find a tenant. Then they're going to charge 10% of whatever the rent amount is. My suggestion is to act as your own property manager, because my experience with property managers is they will nickel and dime you to death. When something needs to be fixed, a lot of them don't want to be bothered, and they'll just call whoever they have on their list, which is a contractor that charges above market value to fix something. And then you don't even know if it's fixed right. That's what I don't like about it. I went through a horrible experience where I actually had the whole house flooded because the property manager that I had her husband tighten a toilet water line, the little line that goes from the wall into the toilet, which is an $8 part. She had her husband tighten it because it was leaking instead of replacing an $8 part. And what happened is the part burst and it flooded the whole upstairs. And so it ended up costing me around, I want to say around $6,000. I had to compensate the tenant for, part of a month's rent because the ceiling was all damaged. I had to have contractors go in there and replace part of the ceiling in the downstairs, and then the carpeting, the whole carpet upstairs. So the thing is, just because they say they're a property management company doesn't mean that they're going to care about your property. Nobody's going to care about your property more than you. Remember that. And the thing is, you think they're going to save you money, but my experience is they've cost me more money. I've had horrible advice from property managers. I'm a real estate broker of 34 years, and I also own some rentals. And so I have a lot of experience with those. And I had a property manager tell me after there was high winds that I should put a claim into my insurance company because the roof got damaged. And I told her no, because every time you put a claim into your insurance company, they raise your rates. And if you put 2 claims in within a year's time, your rates are going to skyrocket, and you may not even be able to find homeowners insurance. Really, insurance is for emergency situations such as a fire or something like that, or something major. If you had water leak that caused a lot of damage. Me, myself, I just paid this 5 or 6 grand out of pocket for a water leak myself because I did not want to turn it into the insurance company. To me, it wasn't worth it to have them raise my rates up and maybe not be able to get insurance later on. I went through a horrible experience where I put 2 claims in within a year's time, small claims. They weren't for very much money, but my insurance quadrupled, and it was a nightmare. They'll always get their money back, these insurance companies. So when you put a claim in, you think you're going to save money, but you know what? In the long run, they're going to get their money back. So any small claims, you never want to put a claim in for something that is low price that you could pay out of your own pocket, because I found it's just not worth it. It's not worth having to pay the huge insurance rates that they're going to stick you with. If you're looking to sell your rental property, I'm a real estate broker and I can help you. If you're in California, Southern California, or if you have a rental property in another state, I can find you an agent that specializes in selling rental properties. Should you sell your rental with a tenant in there? I do not suggest that whatsoever because of the fact that it's very hard to sell when there's a tenant in there. The realtor really has to, and I've done it before, and I was succeeded, but the realtor really has to be able to work with your tenant, and they have to be very personable with your tenant and really nice to the tenant because the tenant has control of the property of when it gets shown. So the thing is, a tenant can say, well, I don't want it, show it this day, or I don't want to show it that day. And so you can miss out on a lot of good buyers because they don't want to show the property or they won't allow you to show it. So it can be a nightmare if you are trying to sell your property with a tenant occupied, unless you have a really good agent that knows how to proceed with selling it with the tenant in there. And if the tenant's cooperative, sometimes you might want to give the tenant an incentive, like $20 per showing. That can help too, because there's nothing in it for them. Why should they let people in to see the property? Plus it inconveniences them. So it's a good idea to compensate them some for that, or maybe give them a little bit of money off the rent. I just sold something in Costa Mesa not too long ago that had a tenant occupied, and the tenant actually were a blessing because they knew how to decorate the inside of the property and it looked staged. And so it showed really good, which was a blessing because I was able to photograph it and get a lot of really good pictures to market the property on the internet to get interested buyers. But if it doesn't show that good with them in there, that's definitely not going to go in your favor. So getting them out is probably going to be better than trying to sell it with a tenant if it doesn't show well. Because the thing is, it needs to show well to be able to get you a good price.